Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to a new edition of Prestige Community Resources, our monthly webinar. My name is Will Bonnet. I'm the president of Prestige Community Resources, and we're dedicated to improving the resilience of the communities that we serve, specifically focusing on wards 5, 7, and 8, where we see most of the issues with substance abuse currently occurring. During the holidays, family unity is everything for most people. In fact, from a psychogenic perspective, displacement is one of the most critical predictors of addiction. This underscores how important family really is to the development of mental and emotional health. Without family, good health, positive self-esteem just becomes harder to achieve. You have to be able to navigate life, and you have to have the foundation to be able to do that. Family systems are part of that foundation, and they're often difficult to navigate. And in our communities, many of our family systems are traditionally, they're non-traditional in their makeup. In this regard, many people have to build family of choice, since the family in which they were born may not have had the resources that will help them to grow and flourish. In this webinar, we will examine the struggle that many people face in navigating this new normal. Now, before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to some of our sponsors. HOSTA, Department of Behavioral Health, the Department of Health, Capital Area Community Food Bank, and M&T Bank are all programs that help to support the work that we do. In this time of struggle, it's important that we as a community come together. And it starts with the individuals, the families, and the other people that make up the communities in which we live, we work, and we serve. For our first speaker, I'm kind of excited because up to this point, we've been kind of getting people who are so immersed in behavioral health. We don't always look at the younger generation. And I was approached by one of our staff members who indicated that this young man is from a community that has seen a tremendous amount of transition. I used to run a residential substance abuse program at 1320 Harvard Street. And so I'm familiar with this young man's, where he's from. And I remember there were about 18 bodies dropped in different playgrounds in less than a year and a half period. So navigating that environment was really difficult, and to see him emerge. And his name is Gerard Garvey. Gerard Garvey is a native and Washington, D.C. based independent recording artist. He's a rapper. He was born at 14th and Gerard Street, raised in the uptown section of D.C. Mr. Garvey learned at a very early age the art of the hustle. Hustling is a part of rites of passage for some people. When his mother gave him his first job on a hot dog stand, unfortunately, he applied it to what he learned legally to illegal activities, thus landing him in jail on multiple occasions. After doing a 3-year stint, he decided to put his effort and energy into something he loved, music and rapping. Using his passion and leading by example, he started a radio show 5 years ago called Grind Season Radio, followed by a clothing line, Grind Season Gear, and Grind Season Clothing, which he's been doing for the past 4 to 5 years. He uses these platforms to give out a positive message, to focus on cultivating and supporting local talent throughout the area, as well as to promote entrepreneurship among native Washingtonians, especially the youth. And I applaud the young man because he's a leader. The turn up gets heavy with him and his partner on their local live broadcast from 8 to 10 p.m. on WINDC radio. And without any further ado, I'm going to give you Gerard Street Garvey. Gerard, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
How you doing today, sir? Thank you so much for that, too. I appreciate all that. How y'all doing today? First thing, I want to talk about this mental health thing because, like, especially neighborhoods that I grew up in, a lot of people don't even realize that they're going through that. And people that's not from the hood, they don't relate to the people going through that either, because it's like, you know, I see my friends or people I grew up with, and they go through these transitions in their life where, you know, sometimes people make mistakes, but then when it's constantly happening and don't nobody have help, they're gonna keep on making them same mistakes. And now the more I look into it, I feel like, yeah, it's mental health issues, mood swings, you know, just all kind of stuff, not even getting no sleep, insomnia, separating yourself from people. They say it's a good thing when you're going through that kind of stuff, but I know friends who do that. They might just be distant. We be thinking they acting funny or something like that, but in reality, they're really going through something. So these issues are really real out here, and we can't be in denial about it. And I think that's the main thing, just being in denial. You know, another thing, abusing drugs and alcohol. Some people go over it. Like I'm a casual drink. I don't drink that much, but I know some people who just drink like daytime. They wake up in the daytime and drink, and then some people will be like, "Oh, he a drunk. He an alcoholic," but they're not really understanding the reason why that person drinks. They trying to run away from their problems and escape their issues, and it's a deep issue. And I really want to be somebody who speaks for it because, like I say, I have a lot of friends who's going through this stuff right here today, and just and it's sad, and I hate to see it. And whatever I can do, I mean, that's what I'm with. You know, they say mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. You know, it affects the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. It also determines how we handle our stress and relate to others. So I hope I'm on the right path. I hope y'all get where I'm coming from as I'm saying this.
Very clearly, not a problem.
Okay. So like every day I'm just working hard. That's why I do what I do too. Like I don't sleep like, you know, people probably think, but I do get my 8 hours in somehow, some way, between 5 to 7. They say people who don't sleep that much either, that's a sign of mental health and stress like that too. So we just need all kind of outlets for people that come from where I come from in my walks too, because people are they attach mental health with older people, but in reality, it's people my age and younger than me that's going through it, and they just don't notice that they're going through these type of things. And it's sad, and a lot of people need this. They need help. A lot of people, and we got to stop shunning them off. And you know, I've become, you know, aware of it now because usually I'd be one of them type of people too. Like if somebody doing something that's just out of the ordinary, I separate myself from them. But then sometimes you got to look deep into it, and then I'm a believer in God, so you got to do right by others when they don't even see what's going on. You know, you got to think for other people sometimes. And the best thing you can do is just give somebody a helping hand when they're going through something like that.
Mr. Garvey, I used to work in the music business myself, and yeah. I'm very familiar with how the music business goes. Radio is no different.
Right.
And I'm gonna just throw a question at you early on. How what are some of the services that you feel that are missing for youth or people who are trying to transition from the streets into a responsible way of living? How can we help our youth get there better?
Well, for one thing, for sure, the recreation centers are not like how they was when I was coming up. Like they was like home. It felt like home. A lot of these kids don't have nowhere to go, so they going from school to their neighborhoods. And while they sitting in these neighborhoods, that's when all this stuff is occurring. I was a teenager. I was playing basketball, team sports, football, basketball. I mean, even we don't even have baseball for our city, and that's something I really don't like because baseball is a good sport, but they never really DC don't have no real like baseball teams and stuff like that. I feel like we gotta like, another thing, stop shunning the younger generation because we don't understand them. Just because we don't understand them don't mean it's just totally bad. A lot of these youngers are going through a lot of stuff. They parents on drugs, their uncles locked up, yeah, and the same as your best friend who you walk to school with. So then when y'all get home from school, y'all indulging in the same activities because there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. And I see it. Like kids don't even jump rope no more. There's no tournaments. Like I had a coach, his name was Travis. And Paul Woods, that was another one. These guys used to come get me they used to come get me out the house and take me to go play basketball. It was more mentors around at that time. So we missing mentors, people who not scared to interact with these younger guys.
Well said. I'm going to share something with you and with the audience. I remember running a program maybe 2 blocks from where you grew up at. And what hit me was the fact that the playgrounds weren't safe. They're dropping bodies on the playground. That becomes a place where people end up hustling. And I agree with you that there ain't no place for kids to go. In fact, it was so bad, I looked up one day and one of my neighbors came by the facility for $300. They sent it in a check. And it gave me $300 so I could repair the rim on the basketball court behind our facility, because that was pretty much the only safe place kids could go. And once the rim got broke, they had nowhere to go. And that's a problem because, we look at the disproportionate rates where our young men get locked up. We look at the disproportionate rates of single parent family homes in the district, and raising a child on your own is not the easiest of things. We look at the disproportionate rate for healthcare, our healthcare outcomes. They're horrible. And when you add all those things up, our kids are at war, just trying to grow up. And that is unconscionable. As leaders, as adults, as members of our community, we have to do our part to fix the problem. We can't leave it up to government anymore. This past 4 years, in my mind, has clearly shown us that the government is not focusing on what our needs are. It's just that simple. Whatever narrative is being spun, bottom line is people still have problems feeding themselves, clothing themselves, navigating into healthy lives. And that's what we're here today to talk about. Are there any other things that you want to add?
Yeah, well, even like with jobs, that's the thing with these young guys. There's no job opportunities, doesn't seem like. I mean, the construction jobs, they go to out of towners, people coming from outside the city, they getting the jobs. We just gotta present more opportunities. Like, of course, we just gotta grab the ones we can grab. If they see opportunity, there's a lot of good kids out there. We just gotta get it out of them.
I appreciate your comments and your wisdom and your insight. And the reality is we need to encourage you and people like you so that you at some point will continue doing what you do, but also you'll start to encourage others, because you came to my attention because you have an impact on the youth. And that to me is clear. I had a kid walk up to me one day. I was wearing a suit and I was leaving a certification class that I teach. And a kid looked up and he said, "Man, I just want to know how to wear a suit like yours. I want to be able to look prosperous like you look." And it blew my mind. And, I sat down and started talking to him. He was 19 years old, right? He had been locked up about 3 years already in the course of his lifetime, which is a horrible experience for a 19-year-old. And so I said to him, the single thing that helped me more than anything else was I stopped using drugs. Because when I stopped using drugs, then I stopped getting locked up. Okay. And once I was able to stop using drugs, I could start focusing on building my life. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy. And he said, "Man, you're right. I can't get a job. That's why I'm out here selling weed, because I'm 19, I got a record, nobody wants to hire me, right? A lot of these kids don't have the social skills needed to navigate a Eurocentric society. So knowing how to dress to get a job, knowing how to do a resume, knowing how to use an iron to iron your clothes, there are a lot of home skills that they never got, and that's not their fault. So I follow everything you're saying, and I just want you to know that we ain't gave up on y'all. We have not given up on our youth. It may feel that way, and in some communities it may look that way, but that's not the narrative we need to spin, that we need to be a part of, or the narrative that we need to push out. Right? So again, I want to applaud you. I want you to encourage you to continue doing your work. I want to thank you, and I want you to hang on here, right? To hear the other speakers and to participate in the panel discussion at the end. But I want to thank you because, you're the youngest guy we've had on here, and I want to continue to open up this venue to be inclusive to all voices in our community. Make sense?
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that, sir.
Thank you so much. I don't know about you guys, but speaking to our youth is always hits me deep. So for my next speaker, I've got somebody that's near and dear to my heart. I love this woman, and I don't know that she knows how much. Business, okay? She is a strong advocate that lives and runs a peer-operated recovery support center in the District of Columbia. I can tell you something about LaMonica. LaMonica is all about the people, serving people who are disenfranchised, who may not have a voice, who may not have an advocate. And I don't know that you're going to find a stronger support or community-based person in the community. As a family peer specialist and a recovery coach, group facilitator, and a speaker, LaMonica spends much of her life advocating for family support, substance use, competence, access and collective knowledge around substance use, recovery, its stages, and its effects. LaMonica has years of experience volunteering and working across all populations of people that derives from homeless families and individuals. Justice involved in youth populations, all of which he believes trauma, a lack of resources, and a lack of variety of resources are intersectional and interwoven factors that bind causes. LaMonica's work has included chairing the PAMI Council of Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness, creating a ballot initiative to place on the next election ballot that will support youth and their families in the district around substance use, treatment, and support, as well as collaborating on street outreach missions with other organizations serving those in need. In 2018, LaMonica ran as a ballot candidate for the Ward 5 council seat, where her tagline read, "People over politics." That's big. LaMonica has also served as an ANC commissioner in Ward 5 and has spoken on numerous panels to include UDC's Law School's panel discussion on solitary confinement. LaMonica feels that there's not enough education and support around the family dynamics as it pertains to substance use. And with that, many families have nowhere to go and are sometimes met with stigma, with the mere thought of wanting to seek help based on condemnation within their society and judgment. In addition, families are faced with shame, disappointment, and embarrassment and begin to reject their own family members based on these emotions. Helping agencies such as the ones that currently exist must work collectively to share resources, tackle the healing process of individuals and their families. And LaMonica believes if we do this together, we can reach more. So I give you LaMonica Jeffrey.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm just waiting a moment for my slides to appear on screen, and then we'll get started.
They should be coming up momentarily. There we go.
So this portion of the webinar will talk about the importance of family and inclusion. Next slide. Is your son dying? DC's behavioral health motto is let help in. I mention this because it governs most of all of the behavioral health programs that the district has. I had never been one to ask for help. My son, Damari, one of the many gifts of my life, loves to play basketball. Damari would play with confidence, and boy, is he good. He would always want me to see him make them shots, and he would say, "Mom, look." And I would sit off to the side of the basketball court and say, "Boy, I'm looking, play before you mess up." I love the admiration we have for each other. But then, just like waking up from a bad dream, I'll awaken one day and bam, my 16-year-old son is using drugs, getting high, and robbing the family of all the future assets we had stored for times, such as the ones we're in right now. Possessions instantly became irrelevant. And I realized my son's life was in jeopardy in the midst of this opioid epidemic. I knew it was an addiction when the smell of K2 awakened everyone in the house one night. I was ready to react. As I approached my son, he was sweating profusely, breathing rapidly with my breathing just as rapid as his. And I approached my son. I looked into his glassy eyes. I seen a stare and knew that my son was inside of there. Multiple feelings were running around in me all at once. My knowledge of drug addiction as a recovery coach and a peer support specialist assisted me in my initial response and prevented me from literally just going off. I realized with increased knowledge around behavioral health, my response was much different to my son as opposed to my daughter, who was found dead hung inside of her jail cell on June 4th, 2016, the day of her release, whom at the time I didn't realize had an addiction or mental health. Oh, and let's not speak of the stigma that was already attached to it, which I have found is attached to the very agencies you reach out for help to. For once in my life, I finally reach out for help and desperately ask for help for my son, Damari. And to no avail, no results. DC has no inpatient substance abuse treatment program for our youth. And to surprise you all, when reaching out for help for my son, they requested that he is first touched by the juvenile justice system. I feel as if time is running out, and I'm trying to save my son's life before fentanyl and carfentanil takes it. I am researching loopholes in the district as it pertains to letting help in and figuring out what that really means. I have myself in many ways made attempts to enact change with the support of others by first understanding politics, AKA the red tape, holding and running for political seats, putting an initiative on the ballot for our youth, as well as running a nonprofit full-time that is currently funded by SAMHSA to assist with this opioid epidemic. What I can tell you in this work is that there's more work that needs to be done. And currently, I'm still on the path with getting help and the support that we need for Damari. I have discovered that what can be done is written in legislation, policies, rules, and regulations. None of those things are benefiting our family. Access, listening, and understanding is 3 of the major key components is to effectively reaching out to help others. What we currently have is a lack of understanding, programs, and a somewhat one-size-fit-all no-lution, not a solution, for many unique problems that is usually based in trauma. How many more sleepless nights do we parents have to have? How many more missing person reports do me and my son need to file? And how many times do we need to pretend everything is all right at home because we're afraid of the stigma and embarrassment society places on our sickness and suffering? And how many times will I struggle between the thoughts of a burial versus a basketball? And how many times must I continue to read a flyer that says, Damari, 16 years old, last seen the 2400 block of 14th Street Northeast. Do you know where your son is? And if so, in the midst of this opioid epidemic, is your son dying? Next slide, please. Why is this important to know? Next slide. In this webinar, let's discuss discovery and crisis of a loved one in an addiction, what families go through, resources, supports, and programs, the help and criteria. Next slide. Discovery and crisis of a loved one in an addiction. When discovering that your loved one is in an addiction, the crisis has begun. You begin to think, wonder, and lose focus, instantly experiencing all of the feelings that you don't want to, ranging from anger, disappointment, sadness, and the list goes on. Families are oftentimes ill-equipped to deal with an addiction and can sometimes immediately reject their loved one if the addiction and behavior that affects the family continues. The crisis of an addiction can involve the family losing items from theft, losing the jobs, losing federally funded housing and other housing, family arguments and violence in the home, disruption in the family household, and the addictive behavior being modeled in front of other children can affect them as well. And of course, the list goes on. Next slide. What families go through. Families may be experiencing, deciding whether to reach out for help, hide the addiction, decide how to speak to their loved ones about the addiction, experience feelings of stress, grief, and loss, develop an onset of behavioral health challenges of their own, such as anxiety and depression, or may just simply suffer in silence. The addictive behavior involves not only the whole person, but also the whole family. It may be helpful if there are services that can assist families with unique family dynamics, help with creating a family plan, providing resources, education on addiction, and group support with families that experience similar situations. This may help families not go through the family-involved addiction alone. Next slide, please. Resources, support, and programs. There are many resources available that exist in our communities. Resources might come by way of self-referrals, being justice involved, or voluntarily placed in a program, involuntarily placed in a program due to what looks like a behavioral health episode, which can easily be merely the result of substance use. Support. Options may come by way of a family, support options may come by way of a family member and friends or groups, recovery coach, or peer supporter. Supporting families in an addiction may look quite different from supporting a sole individual alone. There are many programs available, but they are useless when they're not accessible. There is a long waiting period and/or there is some other barrier which prevent folk from accessing them. When a person is ready for recovery, time is of the essence. Next slide, please. 2 times, click twice. The challenge can be paperwork and repetitiveness, having to repeat the same things over and over for every new encounter. And much to my surprise, some organizations will run the same old line, promoting the same old services, using the same old script. This can be daunting, traumatic, emotional, and aggravating. Next slide, click 8 times. I personally felt as if my son needed to be barcoded. What you are viewing are all of the different people and places that can possibly touch someone who uses drugs or experience mental illnesses. Some of these images are frightening for a family member. And at times, family have to participate in most of all of what their loved one have become involved with, which can take a toll on a family. For me personally, programs and services were presented to my family in a way that my son had to go through a myriad of services. Since when did jail become a service? Although I have heard of jail becoming a saving grace for some. Nevertheless, as a mother, I fear an end result that yields profit, no matter which way is explored. I struggle between having positive versus negative thoughts. All we simply needed to start out with is support and the help of the city assisting us in sending our son to an addiction treatment program. Understand what support looks like for an entire family and how our family members' unique situations are being addressed. Remember, this portion of the webinar is about families in crisis. Resources are limited or underutilized. I know this personally because we need them and because I do this work. I have received requests to assist families with their children in addictions, and I cannot begin to describe the outcry and desperation that they have to save their children. Next slide. Close your eye. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back 1 slide? No, okay, next slide. 1 more. Nope, okay, go back 1. I'm sorry. So close your eyes for a brief moment and imagine how you felt when you discovered your loved one was in an addiction. Feel that? Describe what your family looked like during a crisis. You know what? Never mind, I changed my mind. Don't do that. I would not wish anyone's imagination endure what I and other families endure frequently. In closing, let me share this with you. It is my opinion, real help can be dispersed throughout communities if you ask families what they need. Teach us about addictions and help us to understand them. Work with us on creating a family-specified abuse survival plan. Create a family in addiction substance use platform to engage families and hold each other together in support. Support makes recovery last. Next slide. Thank you. Again, my name is LaMonica and my family is in an addiction.
Thank you so much, LaMonica. It's always a pleasure to have you aboard. You're one of the people whose voice I value. And thank you for disclosure. It's not the easiest thing. Before we move on to the next speaker, I want to take a minute to bring your awareness to an important program that we offer at Prestige Community Resources. Prestige Community Resources provides a wide range of services to the local community throughout the Washington, D.C. and surrounding areas, focusing on chronic medical and mental illness. One of our initiatives is dedicated to expanding services to the homeless community and underserved demographic that has extremely limited ability to engage with essential services, such as calling 911, medical facilities, or other critical organizations. We develop a program to give these individuals a lifeline to essential services simply by giving them a cell phone, providing cell phone usage to a homeless or an indigent person who don't have access to good care. Our initial goal is to provide 500 individuals in need with a cell phone at no charge to them. Generally, the way that we work, we have a partnership with AT&T. We purchase a phone with a plan that has unlimited text, talk, and data. That allows a person who may be in crisis to be able to reach out to a healthcare provider. We currently work in a ward where there's no place to have a baby on east of the river. All the maternity units are closed, but we have 7 dispensaries throughout the city, which is insane to me. We need to focus on preserving family, preserving ties, taking care of our youth, ensuring that people have good access to care. Okay, we need your help to make that happen. A small donation, $30 a month, or one-time donation of $300 will make a positive impact in somebody's life. In other words, if you give a phone, you save a life. That's the tagline, give a phone, save a life. I've had consumers die on me. I've had the medical examiner's office call to find out medical information about a consumer. And in one case, it was a 69-year-old guy who had a seizure in the back of a truck on New York Avenue. And they found him, apparently he had hit his head. And I'm saying that to say it's just tragic that people die when they don't have to. Homelessness in the DMV, 67% of the people in this area, 67% of homelessness in this area is in the district. Okay, when I come to work sometimes, I look across the street. There's a park across the street from where I work. During the summertime, you might have 25, 30 people who sleep in that park overnight. Some of it is drug use. Some of it is they have nowhere to go. And that's heartbreaking. And with that being said, I'm going to move to our next speaker. And I'm also excited about having our next speaker here as well. Give me 1 second. Here it is. Gerard Thomas and Liz Fehrenbach. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Gerard Thomas is the executive director at Joseph's House. And I've worked in residential programs for a long time. And I have to tell you, I've had family members or people I've worked with at Joseph's House, and I can't speak more highly of the work that they do. It is, I love them. I love them. They're off of Columbia Road. They do excellent work. Ms. Thomas assumed the position of executive director in August 2019 after serving as Joseph's House senior nurse case manager for a year. As an executive director, she is responsible for the delivery and quality of resident care physical, emotional, and spiritual, including accompaniment of those who are dying. Developing partnerships with service providers and referral sources, recruitment of staff and volunteers, supervision and training of staff and volunteers in the delivery of compassionate care, and direction for and the development of the Joseph House community. Ms. Thomas has more than 20 years experience providing patient care in long-term hospice, primary, and pediatric care, as well as surgery. True soldier. Prior to Joseph's House, she served in several positions at Capital Caring, providing nursing care to patients with terminal illness, including education of patients and their families, to decrease anxiety and facilitate patients living until death. As senior nurse case manager at Joseph's House, Ms. Thomas was responsible for evaluating referrals, assessing resident need, developing care plans, supervising nurses, LPNs, and nurse aides, and managing the care of residents. Liz Fehrenbach, she's the program director, and they're gonna jointly make this presentation. She's the program director at Joseph's House, and Ms. Fehrenbach has worked as a case manager and healthcare provider for HIV-positive adults and homeless people. Prior to Joseph's House, she provided clinical nursing and medical case management in Burlington, Vermont. Her interest in social justice and contemplative care and experience in providing comprehensive nursing care to the underserved population led her to Joseph's House, where she is responsible for evaluating referrals, assessing residents' needs, developing care plans, supervising LPNs and nurse aides, and managing the care of residents. There's a saying in this field, if you work in residential treatment or residential care, that you know a good program when you walk into it. It only takes you a few minutes, because if you worked in residential care, this stuff just automatically comes up. If you've never been to Joseph's House, I can tell you, when you walk in, it's a family, it's a welcoming environment. Those consumers are at home. I personally had a friend who I love dearly, who does this work. She was about 70 years old, and she ended up in Joseph's House. While she was at the hospital, she stopped eating. She refused to eat. She would not take her medication. She was ready to go. They transferred her to Joseph's House, and they told her she had 3 weeks. She lived probably another 4 to 5 months. And during that time, not only did she eat and gain weight, she went to the zoo. You know, she participated in everything. And as weak and as struggling as her health had become, you guys gave her dignity and you gave her life. And I thank you for that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kashara Thomas and Ms. Fehrenbach.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kashara Thomas, and I am the Executive Director at Joseph House. I'm just going to give you guys just a little information about Joseph House. Next slide. Individuals that arrive to Joseph House have advanced HIV/AIDS, and some have a terminal illness. We provide comprehensive case management and coordinate the current care and coordination for care in former residents. Our staff includes nurses, care aides, social worker, and full-time volunteers. Next slide. Barriers to connections. Many clients are disconnected or estranged from their families of origin prior to their admission at Joseph's House. Trauma histories, addictions, homelessness, and mental health struggles contribute to isolation. COVID-19 safety measures have further contributed to our clients' isolation and disconnection. Next slide. Our goal is to provide a strong sense of family for residents in a home-like environment. We focus on providing companionship and honoring dignity while supporting medical needs. Growing network of former residents, friends who provide social services, who we provide social services and support.
Yeah, and as Will mentioned earlier, the supports that we're trying to offer are really based on that sense that when people have the support that they need, their health outcomes improve across their physical health, their mental health, addiction issues. That support is so crucial, such a crucial ingredient. We were able during the pandemic to start offering a part-time psychotherapist for our clients, both our current residents and our former residents. Some folks have, like many people had referred to already today, there's so much stigma around connecting to mental health services. And one thing that's really nice is that the therapist comes to Joseph's house, and if folks aren't really interested in a more formal one-to-one therapy session, he'll just ride a bicycle around the street with them, or he'll go for a walk, or he'll have coffee with them in the garden, and starts to build up a sense that there's a usefulness to sitting down and talking with somebody about what's weighing on their minds. And he can build that into a more long-term therapy relationship. And in my mind, I hope that folks are more open to accessing therapy or mental health supports for the rest of their lives, because they've had that chance to get introduced to it in bite-sized amounts that feel manageable and feel very much connected to the things they like about Joseph's house. Next slide. One thing that is really important at Joseph's house, always has been, are the rituals we celebrate as a community. The same way that the rhythms of the year are so important to families, it's the same is true at Joseph's house. So we celebrate holidays and other occasions, we celebrate them big. And the pandemic has been, of course, has gotten in the way of that a little bit. You know, we don't get to sit down to meals the same way that we used to. But we've been really doing our best to try to keep that family atmosphere and recreate those rituals as best we can, given the circumstances, and trying to keep everybody safe. So these are just a few pictures of recent events or gatherings that we've had. Our Halloween celebration is always really big. We had one of those candy chutes so kids could safely get the candy at the end of the stairs. We had a COVID memorial when the United States surpassed 200,000 deaths. We had a memorial in the garden to try and reflect on those losses. Just last week, we had one of our residents, she really wanted to be confirmed before the end of her life. She's with us for hospice care. And so a priest came, and in our garden, we had a socially distanced and outdoor confirmation for that resident. And it was a really special moment. Of course, folks are playing cards outside and laughing on the porch and catching up and listening to music. And then the final picture on the bottom right, we always remember the folks that have passed at Joseph's house in our annual memorial service. And I wanted to just tell a little story quickly that, at that event, at the end, usually we hold hands and we say a prayer together, we say the Serenity Prayer, and we have that moment together. And of course, we were trying to avoid holding hands just as part of our COVID precautions. So one of our volunteers thought up the idea that everybody would hold a string. Everybody would take a spot on a string and they would hold that string together, and that would connect us all in the same way that holding hands would. And I think that's the type of creativity we're trying to use to still help folks feel that family connection when they come to Joseph's house, because it is so important and so nourishing for their well-being. Doing the best we can to recreate that given the circumstances. Next slide. Now, I think this is a video. Let's see if it works. This is one of our former residents, Robert. I'm just talking about what Joseph's house means to him. Oh, maybe it doesn't work. Oh, there we go. Let's see.
I'm not sure that the sound is coming through.
Yeah, it's okay if it ends up not working out.
I can just share some of the things that he said in this video. He talked about when one of his case managers told him about Joseph's house and told him that he would, we provided end of life care. And he said, I don't need to go there. I'm not dying. But in actuality, he was off of his medications and he was slowly dying. When he came to Joseph's house, he
I don't mean to interrupt, but I may be able to get it to play.
Okay.
Let me, I had to unmute myself. So let's see if you can hear it now.
I'm a former resident of Joseph's house. My name is Robert Ramsey. If I never made it here, made it at all. Because when I got here, my C4 count was down to 16, which is life-threatening. My doctor told me if I didn't come when I came, I might have died. So I came here because everybody kept saying this is a place where you go when you pass away or something like that. And I kept saying, why I'm coming here? But thank God I came here because this here turned my life around. I got healthy again. Matter of fact, when I came here, I probably was weighing about 115 pounds. Today, I'm weighing 185, 190. So you see the difference already in my weight rise. But just like I said, if it wasn't for Joseph's house, I might have not have made it. Joseph's house is a very beautiful place, inside and out. The residents are beautiful. The staff is outrageous. I enjoyed being here. I'm alive for being here. And right now, I miss being here. Thanks to Joe and her staff. And that's the thing about Joseph's house. It's like unconditional love. Because who you are, what you are, and what's going on. They show so much love to you and for you that the only thing they want is to see you back on your feet doing good. And with that love, I'm back on my feet, I'm doing good. Me, my wife, and my kids is out on the street because the drug addiction and doing my drug addiction like I was saying. I missed my meds for 2 years and didn't realize I was dying until I got here. And it was just like, it was a gift from God, a blessing from God. I made it here and I made it out. There's just so much I want to say about Joseph's house. I just don't know how to say it. I really don't. But I just want to let everybody know Joseph's house is a very special place and they show very special love.
Thank you for making that work. I appreciate it. You can
Thank
go to the
you.
next slide.
I just wanted to say before we close that being a part of Joseph's house really makes our community want to live and be healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally. And being a part of our community is truly a source of healing for our residents and friends that we serve. And if you would like to find out or be a part or, see how you can serve Joseph House and support, you can contact us. My email is here and Liz's email and our telephone number, and you can Google us. And thank you, Will, for inviting us.
No, it's my pleasure. It's an honor. And, I think very highly of the services that you offer, because those services have helped people in my life. And not everyone that comes to Joseph House is terminal. I'm just saying that for the audience's sake. One of the participants, made a comment, the celebrations look very inviting and nice. And my response was, well, they are. While the program sounds morbid, a program where people go to expire, don't get it twisted. The participants are full of life. Therefore, they celebrate life because they cherish the time they have left. To see them, I used to go and visit pre-COVID, and to see everyone at a dinner table, everybody looking out for each other, to see how relaxed and at home the consumers are there, it was amazing to me. And to me, it was clearly clinically beneficial, a beneficial environment. As I said, the person that I was connected to is someone I used to sponsor. She was at end of life, but when she got there, it was like being home. She didn't want to be in the hospital because she didn't want to die in the hospital. She wanted to die at home. When she got to Joseph's House, she was at home, and you guys took great care of her. We have to move to the next speaker. And I love Dr. Lawson. Research and clinical interest in addressing racial and ethnic disparities in care, and has supported innovative treatments for the underserved, mentally ill, and substance abusers in our communities. He has held numerous senior positions, including Chair of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Howard University, President of the District Columbia Chapter of Mental Health America, President of the Washington Psychiatric Society, Chair of the Section of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences of the National Medical Association, President of the Black Psychiatrists of America, Chief Psychiatry at the Rudebush Veterans Administration Hospital, and the Chief Medical Officer for the State of Tennessee Department of Health. These are just a few of his achievements. When I say to you, this guy is a revolutionary, I recently read an article in the Washington Post. Dr. Lawson was interviewed about the need for more Black psychiatrists, that out of all the psychiatrists in the country, they're I think at 3%, only 3% are African American, which is a problem. Another healthcare disparity that we see. But this guy's been on the front line the whole time, and I love him for that. And he's a resource. He's an elder to our community, a resource for all. And without any further ado, I give you Dr. William B. Lawson. Dr. Lawson, turn on your mic.
Yeah, Will knows how to make everyone sound great, and I really appreciate it. Even you look good, bought a picture that showed me about 50 years ago. So nice to know that I haven't gained that much weight. Thanks, Will. Also, thanks being part of this illustrious panel. This is really exciting. Listening to this, I say, heck, I don't have to say anything. Folks said it all. I usually go out and give these long lecture-related PowerPoint slides, but this time I just decided to do something a little different. Tell you about some experiences I've had that may be relevant to what's going on. as some of you know, I was at Howard for 20 years and I'm retired. And I'm in my third retirement. My kids keep saying everything you say is very relevant if the dinosaurs were still here. I said, no, that's not quite true. And there may be some relevant things, and I'm very glad you have a young man in this panel, because that's what we got to hear more of, and they are the ones who are going to be the future of dealing with what we have to deal with. The bottom line is that for me, after some retirements, I decided to do something different. And one of them was that in terms of working with frontline, how best to outreach people, one thing I did do was switch to a virtual practice. That is, use the technology of Zoom. I now practice in 4 states. Now see more patients than I ever saw in my life. So it shows the value you can use technology to address some of the problems that we have. Will talked about the 2 to 3% Black psychiatrists, and actually we have, it's even worse than that when you look at the whole medical profession, psychology and social workers. The number of African-American physicians, the same number we had back in the 1960s, has in terms of Black men, hasn't increased. So whenever you go out there and say you can't find a doctor, can't find somebody that look like me, can't find somebody that thinks like me, it's a reality. And it's a reality that we're making incremental changes in terms of doing something about. Unfortunately, we're involved in terms of holding action, despite the fact that we recognize that mental disorders, substance abuse problems now do exist in our community. I think that nobody doubted that they, well, yes, they did. When I was growing up, I was told that we didn't have those kinds of problems. When I was in medical school, I was told that Black people did not get depressed. When I was in medical school, I was told that we did not commit suicide. When I was in medical school, I was told that if we had anything, we had schizophrenia, and the way to treat it was to lock folks up. So the problems that we have, if anything, because of recent events, have actually increased rather than decreased. They have actually increased rather than decreased. One of the things I did after my first retirement was to take a position out in Texas at a new medical school there. So it was a wonderful opportunity to get away from DC, where things were going gloriously, and go to Texas where they were struggling. At that time, Austin, the Dell Medical School, and Austin was a prominent city, fast-growing city, second fast-growing city in the country. At that time, also was supposed to be the most segregated city in the country as well. Had the healthiest city in the country, but the African-American community was struggling. And that was because of some decisions made back in 1928 when the good folks there decided that they didn't want the resources for the city to go into the Black community and the Hispanic community. And so they actually had someone come out and advise them in how to move all the Black folks in the one side of town and all the white folks in the other. So all the hospitals, and to this day, all the hospitals there are in one side of town, where the Black folks and Hispanic folks are in the other side of town. So I said, oh, wow, look at that. That is the bizarrest thing I ever heard. I don't know of any other city that would go along with that. So when I came back to DC, what did I discover? I said, well, let's see, Ward 7 and Ward 8, how many hospitals? What? Where are the healthcare facilities? Why are all the doctors on one side of town? And I had been in DC for a long time, and in some part of me knew that that was true, and yet it was a reality that was so widely accepted that the city leaders continued to have that situation. And that is that DC, a city that had African-American leadership, a city that had large African-American community, had a situation in which our healthcare resources, our mental health resources, substance abuse resources, which are non-existent in many ways, are all in one side of the city, and the people, look, and you can go by the skin color, the people are in the other side of the city. And the question is always raised, how come we don't have resources. And I keep hearing we don't have enough resources. DC is lacking of resources. We don't have enough health care. We don't have enough funding. And in fact, DC spends more money per capita, mental health, some educational services than virtually all cities in the United States. And yet the results are that if you look at the outcomes, they're terrible for people of color. Why is that? How can that be? Well, it's simple reason, it's simple separation. You can call it segregation, you can call it poor urban planning, describe it what you want. The result is that the services are in one part of the city and the people who need them are in the other part of the city. And because of that separation of lack of services, the people who need them end up getting sicker, requiring more services. And because the people who provide services, including the federal government, like to go where the healthiest people are because it's cheaper to treat healthy people, you'll find out that there's an accelerated process in where there's less and less services where the sick people are and more services where the people who are not sick are. And what kind of sickness are we talking about? We mentioned substance abuse, we mentioned mental health, but substance abuse and mental health contributes to other kinds of problems too. It contributes to diabetes. If you don't eat right, you'll get diabetes. But if you are a substance abuser living in the street, it's hard to eat right, and so you get diabetes. If you hypertension, if you're in chronic stress, trying to struggle all the time, end up in correctional system, you can get hypertension, chronic hypertension, and then so on and on and on. DC has one of the highest amputation rates in the world. Why is that? Because we have, and this is something that I learned with Texas. Texas is a lot of what we call food deserts, places where you don't have grocery stores. People end up in fast food joints all the time. I said, DC, that's not a problem. We got a lot of fine restaurants, plenty of good places to eat. Discovered very quickly that in large stretches of the district, there's just not a grocery store. And as a result, people are limited in terms of eating quality food. They are limited in terms of eating anywhere but at fast food places. What are the consequences? You have diabetes. You have such problems as you have one of the highest amputations rates in the world, where people keep on eating the highest sugarized diets. You have all the consequences as if you did not have stores that provided quality food. So again, the separation in the district that exists, and there's an excellent book called Caste, talks about how Black folks can look at the caste system in India, with separation that exists precipitates and makes worse the kind of problems that we say that the district has. And I just want to emphasize that it's not an absence of money. Money is here. It's not an absence of resources. Resources is here. It's a disconnect between where the people are, where the people's needs are, where they have access to these needs, and where the service providers are. And as a result of that, we have an acceleration of these kinds of problems. Just mentioned some of the programs I've been involved in. I had an opportunity recently to spend a little bit of time at St. Elizabeth. We all remember St. Elizabeth, the residual of the time when the way we dealt with mentally ill people, we locked them up. Now it's become mostly a forensic facility, but it's still there. They worked hard to get the people out of the hospital, went from over 5,000 beds down to 200 or 300 beds, 600 beds. And they said, oh, that is a tremendous advance in terms of dealing with mental health services in the city. But then someone asked the obvious question, well, we took them out of the hospital, what did you do with them? They ended up on the streets and they ended up in the jails. They ended up where there are limited services. One of the panelists already said he was shocked when they saw the correctional system as a service provider. I had some time to spend some time over at the DC Superior Court, working in their crisis center, and discovered oh my gosh, this looks just like a mental health clinic. And in many ways it was. Many of our young people are ending up in the correctional system rather than in school or rather than having their needs addressed. And when you end up in the correctional system, there's all kinds of consequences on their result. I asked one young man, he'd been in and out of jail, 16 years old, been in and out of jail, correctional programs most of his life. How did you get into this? He said, well, a friend of mine said, try this out. And he gave him some drugs. And he said, wow, this stuff makes me feel good. Started using it then, and then it showed him that it was a way of making money. So he started dealing. And as a result, got kicked out of school, could find difficulty, get a job. As my mom was lost at home because in DC, if you got you using drugs, you know, you literally lose your housing. And he began a career in and out of the correctional system. Try to get services, they try to provide mental health services there, they try to provide others, but it's not a system that's designed to provide mental health services. It's a system that's involved with security. That is their goal, security. It is not to make people more educated, not to provide them a better life, it's to provide security. And but nevertheless, we're stuck with that system because our country decided that it's very important to get drug dealers off the street, to get them out of treatment programs. And so what did we do at that time? Put them in jail. That became a big controversy, led to huge numbers of people in the correctional system. It's now beginning to reverse itself, but the damage is done. We already have several generations that have spent much of their time in the correctional system. Talking to somebody who's been in jail, one young man, not young anymore, 30 years old before he got released, marijuana possession. That is not a way to pass away your life. And there was not a way to be able to get a job doing something else. The challenge for him was to find out what could he do. And as a result of that, he became HIV positive while he was in jail. And then you get the whole question of, since you don't have sex in jail, how do you get HIV positive? That was a different story. And again, how do you rehab him and get him back in the community? And it's possible, but it requires a total shift in terms of resources. And I can mention a number of those cases of folks who end up in the correctional system. I diagnosed one young guy very quickly as he had bipolar disorder, manic depressive illness, and would respond very well to medication for that kind of disorder, but he didn't get it while he was in jail. And he didn't get it before he was getting in jail. The whole time he was still a criminalized individual. I had a patient who we got him on some treatment, did very well, took care of his mother, was just a wonderful guy. Then one time he went out and said, let me get a little high. Went out, got some cocaine, got arrested. I said, don't you think you'd better put him in a treatment facility rather than to lock him up? No, we got to get these people off the street. And so this young man who was working his way to actually wanted to get into college and so forth, that part of his life had come to an end because of the draconian drug abuse laws that existed at that time. Then there's the whole issue of housing. Why are you out trying to get drugs? Why do you go lived in a homeless shelter? And I had one young man, his job was to go to bars, pick somebody up so they'll let him stay at his house, stay at their house. I said, what about get your own place, man? And he said, that's just DC. I can't afford anything here. I don't know what kind of job. I'd have to get 5 degrees to get a job that would make me enough money so that I could get a decent place to live. And these homeless shelters are terrible. I mean, you can't live in there. And the solution, of course, is housing. And we have DC's finally got a Housing First program here, which is a tremendous advance, and it just uses a model for Austin, Texas. But It's something that was long delayed. Expensive housing, discovered very early on. You can put people in housing that have substance abuse or mental problems, but they end up getting kicked out of the house or lose the place because they still have the substance abuse or mental health problems. So housing first trial is usually, they think is a unique idea. I think it's about time combining treatment with housing. And that way people can stay in housing, they can purchase the housing, and then get their problem solved. But again, that takes resources, takes will, and it takes community efforts to make those things happen. So I think the good news is, again, DC has a number of programs that can address these problems, but we need the community will to make those things happen. We need to get our politicians recognized that we have to address the housing problems in the city because the largest growing population, the homeless population, is families with children. To be sure that they get the resources, they can get the housing, you need to get the services, because folks who are homeless often are homeless because somebody in the family may have some mental problems, may got involved with substance abuse, or just plain ain't got no money and don't have a decent job. So how do we make sure that people can get enough funding or services to be able to stay in homes? If, in the long run, many economists will tell you this pays off in terms of the wealth of the city. But in the short term, when taxpayers go and vote, see how we spend the money and so forth, and you start trying to put in the services and taking away from safety and corrections and so forth, they won't do it. They say, we're not gonna put all this money to these folks. Why should they get the money? Why should they get the resources? They're not the right kind of people. We need to put the money in other kind of services. And as a result, you see a perpetuating system in which you have a large segment of the community that is simply service deprived, and another service part of the community that you will need these services that the wealth of the city is moving to. So, and then the other part of it, of course, is community participation in terms of decision making. I always thought DC was great for community and involved the comments and statements of the citizens. We vote and do all these other things, but I quickly found that many of the decisions are not made in terms of legislation that is quite visible. Many of these decisions are made in terms of other kinds of components of the city that is beyond the role, the availability of taxpayers, unless they are very aggressive of getting information. Simple questions about whether or not programs are working or effective. A list of what grants are available and that community members can get access to. You do it, requires specialists to do it, but it's not something that the average citizen can do. And so DC has a nice website that gives that information. Many places don't have it. And again, just having community organizations, you start a and I just had the fun of work with several nonprofits. That in itself is requires a college degree just to work through the labyrinth of getting the services that's involved in a nonprofit organization. You want money? There it is. But you gotta go through the number of multi-layered steps, and you better hire a lawyer too, or you may end up in jail in terms of being able to manage money that would come from the nonprofits. So again, more needs to be done to educate the community to do this. And we have our own resources. One of the biggest resources that the African-American community have are some of those that do not show up on the front pages. These include our barbershops, which are wonderful to communicate what's happening, our beauty parlors, and we've been working with them to help educate and get information about mental health, substance abuse services, and of course, our churches. We got big ones, little ones, all over the place. We got churches in DC. And what I quickly recognized was that many of the churches simply do not work together to get resources. I'm working with one large group already. It was amazing how the churches got together to deal with the HIV crisis. And they're starting to do the thing in terms of the coronavirus. get them together to deal with substance abuse and mental health is a whole different matter. And then one church I went to, one of the people that got to join was someone who was severely mentally ill, had problems taking bath every day, didn't have a place to live. He'd come into church and people would sit on the other side of the church to get away from him. There were folks who were expressing their interest in terms of Christian love, but it sort of ended when they recognized that he wasn't like them in many ways in terms of how he saw the world. So the churches can be a wonderful resource. But I've talked to several ministers who say, you know, Dr. Lawson, what you saying about mental illness, depression, substance abuse, I think that's wonderful. But just have a problem with thinking of that as something you treat. See, to me, if you're spiritually aware that these problems will take care of themselves. So I reminded myself, if I break my leg, I can be spiritual aware all I want, but I better put a cast on it, it'll get better a lot faster. So tying together the church with professionals of any sort is a challenge, but essential if we're going to move ahead and have the churches play a major role in terms of addressing some of the really in-depth social issues. Many of our people do know that the church can be a place or the religious community where they can get some help and support. Unfortunately, in dealing with some severe problems, many times some of our ministers are either not trained for it or are not philosophically in tune in terms of how you can address it. So I think that's a resource that we need to do more with. The ones I've talked to, you get them the resources, they'll work with it, and I think they can make a big difference in terms of being a fundamental resource for addressing the needs in our community. It'll be in the interest of the churches too, because you know the number of people going to church, young people stop going to church. One reason, they say one reason they stop because it's not interesting or exciting enough, but another reason is that they ask the question of, is the church serving the needs of our community? Very much like the churches used to do when I was growing up in the rural community. Back in the old days, the Black church played a huge role. Now, once again, it's a challenge for the church to step forward. And again, there are other organizations that we've heard of already that folks are creating that are not government agencies, not necessarily formal nonprofits, but which are developed out of community needs. We need to give them some meat, we need to give them some resources so that they can be the basis for delivery of services out in some of our traditional agencies, which unfortunately are underrepresented in terms of people that are aware of our cultural needs in our community. So let me end on that note, say that we've made tremendous technological advances. Going back to the space station, we sent people to the moon. We've got great technology, wonderful technology. We made tremendous medical advances. There are many more, we got new drugs, different kinds of psychotherapy, and different kinds of group therapy that really work, that can address mental health and substance abuse needs. Unfortunately, these services often are not immediately available for our community. We can't get them. And not only just cost, but also where the community wants to provide the resources. So we need to address that. And then most importantly, we need to use our knowledge base, our education, not what you get necessarily in terms of getting a college degree, but actually some awareness of our cultural heritage, some issues such as the fundamental basis of structural racism, some bases in terms of political issues, basic economic issues. We need to get that information throughout community. Thank you.
Dr. Lawson, I want to thank you so much. I love hearing you speak, and you know, for Gerard, Street Garvey, and other young people out there, you know, what Dr. Lawson just did is kind of like freestyle. You know, usually a psychiatrist talks, they're following a script, but to hear you come from your heart, that's important. I do want to mention this to everyone, the participants, that the replays and presentations will be available on our website, www.prestigecommunityresources.org, and can be sent via email next week. So we'll send it out to all the participants next week. If you'd like to receive it by email and you have not subscribed to Prestige's email newsletter, please drop your email address into chat. And chat is at the bottom of your screen. Just click on it, put your email address in. We are about to move to our panel discussion, but I want to turn it over to Deanna. She has something to play real fast. And then I want to talk a little bit about our housing and our peer support education programs.
We just want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors. As you can see displayed here, we have Bread in the City, Bread for the City, M&T Bank, Amera Group. We have the District of Columbia, Mayor Bowser, as well as you can take your phone right now if you would like to go ahead and do the donation for the phone that Will entered or talked about earlier. You can scan that QR code that we have here, or you can go to our website, which is located here, and feel free to make a donation. It's your turn to save a life. Donate now. And last but not least, you'll see a poll appear on your screen. We're asking everyone to please just take this really short poll to tell us how we did today. Thank you all.
I think we're losing you, but we're going to put the poll. Right now, I think that I would like, if any of the participants have any questions they want to ask the panelists, please put it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I want to talk a little bit about the peer support program. Could you put the survey down, please, Deanna? I want to talk a little bit about
Survey if they would like to.
Yeah, bring it down for a second.
It's going to show on your screen. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Our peer support program is funded by the Health Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, and will pay for students' tuition and provide a stipend for completion of internship hours. So if we have somebody who has lived experience in substance abuse or mental health, and they've been impacted by the opioid epidemic, it means, have you used opioids, or has someone you know that you love, that you're connected to, have been impacted by the opioid epidemic, which in turn has affected you. And I think LaMonica talked a lot about that earlier, about how when somebody's in the family using it, affects other people in the family. If that's your situation, one of the solutions that we currently have is we have a peer support program that's funded through HRSA, and we do it in conjunction with Jordan Peer Recovery. This program will pay your tuition, which is roughly about $3,000, but also pay you $500 a week for completion of an internship, so you can become a certified peer. Once you get certified as a peer, that qualifies you for a number of different types of jobs in helping people who have mental health or substance abuse issues. Okay, so that peer support education program is a new one. It's going to be very vital to healthcare services delivery, because it puts people with lived experiences right on the front line. And these are the people that know where all the landmines are. If I get clean, what are some of my challenges? If I don't like my medication, what is it I need to do? So that peer support education is important and will become increasingly more important, especially with the shortage of healthcare providers that we're currently seeing because of COVID opioid epidemic social justice issues, so forth and so on. The other thing I want to mention is, and I'm really proud of this one, our Prestige Community Resources recently opened up a housing program. Our housing program is run by a woman named Tania McQueen. Prestige is affordable housing for single individuals, provide safe, affordable transitional housing with supportive services for people 18 years or older. The goal is to help residents transition into long-term housing. All residents are required to sign a lease with Prestige Community Resources and to pay rent. The rent is basically reduced, and we include all the utilities, including cable and parking, into the lease agreement, which is way below market rate. So Prestige operates several SRO units in Northeast and Southeast DC. The amenities include all departments are fully furnished, all utilities, including cable, telephone, and internet, close to public transportation. If you don't have a car and you need to park, eligibility is you must be a DC resident, 18 years or older, 4 months of documented clean time from drugs and alcohol, have no recent history of violent behavior over the last 12 months, negative TB and COVID tests, okay? What's attractive also, one of the amenities is that, you know, all the people that live in the housing unit will be tested for COVID free of charge once a week. So you can stay on top of your health that way. Cannot be a lifetime, we screen out for sex offenders, and cannot owe DC Housing Association money unless you're willing to settle the debt. So we talked about peer support, talked about housing. We are going into the panel discussion. I'm looking for questions from the participants. I do have one, and it goes to Joseph's house, Kashara and Liz. What are, and when you describe your program, and I know your program, and I'm going to echo something that was said the last time we presented, I heard you guys present. One of the council members in Ward 8 looked up and said, we need that program in Ward 8. And Dr. Lawson just said it. On one side of the city, you have services. On the other side, you got people. So how can we get a program like yours in Ward 7 and 8? Is there anything y'all can do, or is there anything we can do to make that happen? Because I do think your services are needed. And not only your services, your approach to services. Right.
Thank you. I agree with you. We've been talking about this for some time now, and it's truly funding. Most of our funding we receive from the Department of Health and some faith communities and individual donors. So, and that's just supporting the house here. So we need a lot more funding to be able to bring the same service over on the east side of the river.
Okay, excellent. I mean, funding, that's one of the big problems in the district is property. So opening a program up, getting the right property to make it work. I love the story behind the property that you have over on Columbia Road. Is that something you want to tell?
Yes, so one of the doctors worked over at Christ House, and he wanted to have a place where he can have a community. He can build a community for, you know, during that time, there was a lot of people dying of HIV, you know, AIDS here in Washington, DC. And he saw these patients at Christ House, and what they were missing was a community. They didn't have family, you know, so he wanted to be able to provide that to them. So just walking the neighborhood, he found this house and he moved in here with his wife and his 3 children. and 3 residents, and they lived in a house together and they continued. Some people, you know, it wasn't just for men to die. You know, when people think about, oh, it's just a place to die. No, it was true family. That's what they were offering those gentlemen that moved into this house. And it has been continued to do the same thing through over 30 years now. It's family. That is what makes us unique from other organizations, is our community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Liz, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think she really covered it. I mean, we talk a lot about how to expand our services and meet people where they're at, because we're in this fixed location, but we want to continue trying to meet folks where they're at. So it's definitely something that's on our minds a lot.
Okay, my next question goes out to Gerard Street Garvey, and you've been waiting a while now, so now I got to get you involved, my brother. And it's basically a 2-part question. How do you refine your message to stay connected to the youth that need to hear from you? How do you refine your message, and how do you expand your reach? Because there are other, you know, you're from 14th and Gerard. There are other 14th and Gerards throughout the city, whether it's Kenilworth, whether it's, Division Avenue, wherever. You know, there are other communities just like 14th and Gerard, right, where people are living under the lash. How do you refine your message and expand your reach? Your turn.
Basically, I need more men like me. I use my social networks to push my message out there. But like, just by meeting you alone, this helps me to, expand my message. And it's just more things I got to do in the community myself too, to refine my message also.
You know, one of the guys that helped me, and I'm kind of like you, I was in the music business, and I was young. My boss turned me on to heroin. And I worked for CBS. I worked on things like the Michael Jackson Thriller album. I used to work with a lot of entertainers. And I found out the business was dirty. The business almost killed me. And, you know, that's not to cast any dispersions on music. It was really about the business. But what I found out in getting me together was one of my mentors looked up and said that his life turned around when he needed other people. And I realized I was going through life thinking I ain't need nobody, trying to do everything on my own. And a lot of that was because my dad died when I was 12 and nobody filled that void. So I ended up on the streets trying to figure out on my own. You follow? And I just want to say to you, you ain't alone. There are a lot of dudes like me, right, who need guys like you to pass the message on to. Because without you, without being able to pass that message on to somebody else, we ain't got no legacy. Legacy ain't about the money that you leave. It's about the messages that you give. And the messages that you give to the community need to be messages that can be passed on. So if I plant a seed, right, sooner or later it's going to grow. You got to plant seeds too, if that makes sense. And so in that regard, we might be of different generations, but we just alike. We just alike. And, you know, I had a discussion with my daughter about, you know, this whole social justice stuff that we're going through. And it was heartbreaking because I looked up and I said, we did what y'all doing. We protested. I lived through the riots. We burnt half the city down because we were angry, we were hurt. We were going through stuff, we were poor. I grew up poor, you know, and What's hurtful is to look up, now I'm 63, and to realize ain't nothing changed. That's hurtful. That my child has to go through what I went through. I would want to have made it better. So we need you. We need you in place. We need you to be a strong advocate for your generation, because Dr. Lawson is right, you're our future. And without you, we don't have no future. Make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
LaMonica, is she? LaMonica, you there? Okay, Dr. Lawson. Do you have any words or advice to any of the members on the panel, or just to the audience, about what some of the next steps that we need to take as a community?
Yeah, I think what you said was right on, and that is that we need to recognize that we as individuals, no matter how talented, no matter how much resources that we have, we're not going to get anywhere unless we pull together. If you look at a puzzle and you take any one piece, it doesn't do anything. You need to have all the pieces pulling together, working together. And what I've seen already is I can get a bunch of ideas of how we can improve things by pulling some of these services together. Like what they're doing with Prestige, the housing program, and the idea of having housing can be a source for a physician's office. All those are doable things. Other countries, they do these things. Above and beyond communism and all that, Cuba had this concept of having the physician work with a group of families and provide housing. But the government there paid for it. I don't know if they'll pay for it in the US. But again, those kinds of creative things are necessary if we're going to move ahead. The fact that we are aware of the problems, the fact that we recognize that the gains that we made a couple of decades ago are not lasting unless we get behind and push them, I think is part of that awareness. And I think a lot of us recognize that this last election, last 4 years, was a wake-up call, that the advances that were made on the civil rights movement and others are not lasting, or even having a bomb in it. It's not lasting. It's not lasting unless we become actively involved in terms of that whole process and stay with it. And it's not going to be we wake up one morning and say, I had a problem solved, let's go home and just live normal. This is something that's going to have to be ongoing, that we're going to have and carry and pass the word on to our next generation. Look, we've done this. You got to get on the ball where we are and build on it and keep going.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawson. I also want to, I heard you when you said our churches, right, in some ways have failed the communities by not taking on social justice issues or issues that impact the community. And I don't want to use the word fail. I want to say that, the churches that we love and support, that's a part of the fabric of our community, really have to focus on, right, some of the issues that are facing our community, because that's part of the ministry, or that's what the ministry should be addressing. But I want to talk to LaMonica as well. And LaMonica, I want to thank you for disclosing, about your children. My heart goes out to you. I don't know what it's like to lose a child. I know what it's like to lose a loved one, right? I know what it's like to have an addicted person in your family that you love, and then you try to do everything. So in closing your eyes and thinking about, I'm there, I know it. How can, and in spite of all that, you had to endure. You built a business of helping people in spite of all. So I see you as a true soldier, you know, and I don't know that someone could have a better advocate for mental health or substance abuse than you. How can, you know, what do you think is missing, and how can we help you build your message and help people?
So thank you for that, Will. So for me personally, I feel like if we collaborate and work together, we can be better at assisting each other. I also feel that people need to either increase their level of understanding or either decrease their level of understanding about what's going on. Because just like things evolve, you have what's happening in the street on a negative aspect that evolves, such as drugs. So, you know, I went to school and got my little AA in psychology. And, you know, I had this edition of this book. But while I was using that edition of that book, the drug world and the mental health world was helping. So to stay connected, to understand, to come down here and talk to the folk who's experiencing all these things, it will help. There's a lot of red tape in our system, as you know, and it prevents us from having access. Every shoe don't fit the same size foot. And until we understand that, we're just going to keep programming people to death. I'm a service, not a program. So I'm there to assist individuals. But in order for us to work together as a community, you got to work on yourself first, because you cannot come together as a community and think that you're going to help somebody else if you ain't helping yourself. Because I'm going to be the first transparent person on this video to say that a lot of the issues that are based in trauma started in home. So of course, my home had a lot of issues, and that's what turned out children on drugs. Children that's on drugs usually tend to go into the adult system and still be using those drugs later. So I don't want to consider myself as a person running a business. I want to put people out of business from making money off of profiting from problems, because that ain't the way to go. Because if the person next to me suffering, then I'm going to suffer. Where do you think the crime and all the other issues that people complain about come from in our neighborhoods? That's because you don't want to be neighborly and help the person that's suffering. So until we come together, until we address our own individual issues that we have, and until we come clean and be true to ourselves, who we are, and go back and do some personal development, then I don't know how much help we're going to be able to provide your neighbor, to me, my son, or anybody else's children. So a lot of this work is not about an organization, but people work and run organizations. And if you ain't got the right people working and running these organizations, you ain't got nothing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I thank you for that comment that you just made. You know, living in a neighborhood, but you ain't being neighborly. I'm not sure if I got it exactly right, but that makes perfect sense. We get so consumed by chasing money and chasing work and chasing, you know, our desires. We forget about our neighbors. We forget about our sense of community. And without that, we don't have nothing. I mean, let's be clear. I want to go to a question that was in the question and answer box. With so many families suffering from COVID-19 and possible massive evictions in 2021, what resources are in place or outreach to support those suffering with housing, domestic violence, whole health? I think that you mean medical health, mental health. What can we do? That's for anybody. Anybody in the panel can answer that question.
I just know one thing, that part of modern technology, at least for mental health services, the group I'm working with and several other groups are now going virtual. And so you can get mental health services by having a cell phone now that can get you a wide range of services. It's not the answer to everything, but you can get supportive services, you can get information, you can get psychotherapy, you can get medication, you can get a lot of the services that now, formerly you had to go to bricks and mortar place to get. Doesn't solve the business about getting a roof over your head. That's another whole challenge in and of itself.
Excellent. Anyone else? I agree with what you're saying. I think there are a lot of services that are actually available. One of the big issues for African-American people or minority communities is that, you know, access to services isn't good. You know, it's hard. You might have a hospital right around the corner, but if you're so busy working, you're in a single family household, you got to work, you got kids you got to take care of, you got to cook dinner, you got to get them ready for school, you got to help them with the homework. When can you take time off to go to the doc? Or you're behind in your bills. How can you take off from work and not and run the risk of not being able to pay your rent, right? So going to a doctor's appointment when you don't have benefits, you know, it's more than just paying a copay. It means you're taking money out of your income that you might not be able to afford to do. So, I mean, this is definitely a very complex and problem, providing access to care. And in some communities, care don't exist. You know, there's no detox in Ward 7 or 8. Okay, there's no center where people can go. You know, I ran into a woman quite often, actually. She panhandles at the local 7-Eleven that I go to. And one day I stopped to talk to her because, you know, we can ignore people, we can be in our own zone, and when you do that, you might miss your blessing. And when I stopped to talk to her, you know, she basically said to me that her boyfriend got killed like 6 months before, right? And she's been homeless ever since. And when I say homeless, she sleeps on concrete. When she's not living in a shelter. She's in front of 7-Eleven panhandling instead of prostituting because she still has enough of her dignity, right, where she's not going to compromise that, but she doesn't have the means to access housing or care. When I asked her about, you know, do you have any ID? No. So I tried to get her in a program because you're supposed to be able to get her into a program even without ID. And the first thing they said was, well, you know, they created another barrier, which at that point, she started crying and walked out the door. And, you know, access to care ain't always the easiest thing. And it ain't always about where the program is. It's about meeting people where they are. Because she is a stakeholder. We shouldn't be leaving anybody behind. And I just wanted to say that. We're at 1:57. We have 3 minutes left.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, and the other, and I'm glad you mentioned those because a lot of these problems are really, have to be blunt about it, were decisions that the community made. I'm saying community in general, but politicians, whoever, made, meaning well, but the consequences were not intended. And unfortunately, all too often, most of these decisions are made, we aren't able to turn around and try to go back and correct our mistakes. And I can go down to a bunch of them. The biggest one, of course, was the decision that we're going to use incarceration to resolve the substance abuse problem and coming up with these draconian sentences. We're still trying to correct that. And some of us are concerned that we're going to overshoot and then not have programs to address it. Same way in terms of addressing the housing issue. Decide that we're going to zone out certain areas and that we're going to give focus to bringing in housing for high income individuals rather than for other people. Again, that's a decision that's made in terms of how housing is zoned, how land is zoned, whether or not you're going to have mixed use buildings and so forth. Those are decisions that were made by the politicians that we elected. And the same thing that goes in terms of some of the services we have, in terms of who should pay for the services. Those are decisions, and I think it's important. I mean, those of us who are in the front line, who are in the community, should do what we can to become aware of how these decisions are made, so we can get the message out to the community interpreted. So the next time they go vote or make day-to-day decisions, they can make sure that it's in the interest of all of us, not in the interest of a few well-connected individuals.
We're down to our last minute. I want to encourage that everybody, first I want to thank our panelists. You guys were great. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to share your experience, strength, and hope, and your concern for the community and the path that we need to take to heal as a group. And, you know, to me, that is such an honorable thing, you know, because you're giving of yourself. I want to thank Prestige for allowing me to have this platform, as well as the sponsors that support the work that we do. I want to remind everybody that we do this every month. For this month, we normally go on the last Thursday of the month, but we're doing it the third Thursday because of Thanksgiving, and in December, it will also be the third Thursday because of Christmas. I want to suggest that if anyone is in need of food, we do a food drive every Wednesday at 1418 Good Hope Road. We normally give out close to 300 boxes of food. They're COVID boxes for families. They're designed to feed a family of 4 for at least 2 weeks. And we don't require anything other than you come sign your name and pick up the food. But we do that every Wednesday. With that being said, this has been a wonderful webinar for me. I've certainly gained a lot. LaMonica and Gerard Street Garvey and Kashara and Ms. Fehrenbach, you guys were great. Dr. Lawson, love you to death. You, when I grow up, I'm gonna be just like you. You guys take care and y'all have a blessed day, and I'll see y'all next time.